This is the Henry's Child Podcast. Am I crazy? Or am I just raving?
Hey guys, Thom here. Welcome to the second part of my conversation with Howard. At this point, Howard has become the manager of Eugene's popular band, the Cherry Poppin' Daddies. He also has began the co-label deal with Elemental Records. At this point, the Daddies have just recorded Zoot Suit Riot and are about to get signed. Howard takes us on that journey and tells us also about his writing career, and we discuss at length his new book called When All Else Fails. Please enjoy the second half of my conversation with my friend and mentor, Howard.
We were going down to L.A. to play this childhood leukemia gig benefit. I don't know how we got the guy who, and it was at Bloomingdale's in Beverly Center in L.A.
Oh, really?
And
that's a trip.
And the guy who was the PR guy for Bloomingdale's was a huge Daddies fan, and he was like, "Hey, and they're paying us like, God, it was a ridiculous amount of money. It was like for us at the time for one gig, it was like, we'll fly you down, put you up in a hotel, and pay you like, I think we made." It was like $7,500 or something.
Wow, for one show?
We're like, okay, and you're gonna fly us down and then give us a rental bands, and it was just totally paid for. And it was child leukemia, and the guy, they made a movie based on a TV show. It was a TV show about two cops, Starsky and Hutch.
Okay.
Not David Soul, but the other guy. I guess one of his children had died of childhood leukemia or something. So he was there. It was like Aaron Spelling, Tori Spelling, like Courtney Cox. It was like Hollywood.
Wow.
Right?
Daddies for celebrities.
But before that, Steve and I got in the van and we drove to Santa Monica, had a meeting with Jay Rifkin, who was the head of Mojo. And Steve told him, look, we're fine with you putting this out, but we want a 2-record deal and we want to make an album that's a Daddies album after that. And Jay was like, okay, when we didn't know what was going to happen all at that point.
Right.
But we saw the swing thing getting bigger, and Swingers had come out or was coming out, and the swing thing was building, especially.
Oh, yeah. You mean the movie Swingers is what you're talking. Yeah.
We went to we'd go to the Brown Derby after a gig in LA, and it was like, wow, this thing's like weird and happening. It's crazy. And like, Big Bag Voodoo Daddy was happening. Row Crown View existed like when we existed back in the 90s, earlier.
Yeah, I kind of remember them. And
so, we were like, it was a handshake. Okay, we're going to do this. So, we'll have our lawyers talk and blah, blah, blah. We went back to the Beverly Center, played the gig. Well, Steve played the gig, and I was there. And the thing was, okay, it was like $7,500 for a 45-minute set, and if we played another 15 to 30 minutes, we'd make another $2,500. So people were actually leaving, but the guy was so happy about the gig, he was like, just keep playing. And so he gave us a check for the rest of the money. And then we told the guy we got what was happening. He was like super excited for us. Can't remember his name. He was super excited for us. He got us the penthouse at the Roosevelt Hotel. The Roosevelt Hotel is right across from Grumman's Chinese Theater. It's
yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's like you see a lot of like, I think Californication, a lot of the shots are in that hotel. He said, just go. I got you some other rooms. Don't worry about it. And we didn't know what it was until we got to the hotel, and we're like, oh my God, he got us the penthouse, which was like rooms for all of us, and it looked out onto L.A.
That's awesome, man.
Amazing. And so the other thing was, this is a funny story, the Oregon thing, is one of the guys who was serving alcohol, he was from Corvallis, and he knew us. And we told him, we told him what had happened, that we got this deal, and he was like, here, take these bottles. Like, it was like, I don't know how much these bottles of scotch were. They were like 40-year-old. I mean, it was like the best scotch I'd ever drank up to that point in my life.
Wow. Yeah.
And he was like, just take them. Congratulations. Well, I'll just tell them it was drank. I poured them all out. Don't worry about it. They don't care. These people are worth, So we got signed to Mojo, and then we stopped producing it ourselves, and they put it out. It was like we watched, there was SoundScan back at that time. Remember Sound?
I do. I remember SoundScan,
yeah. Because CDs, you scan them, you exactly know how many exactly sold.
So SoundScan essentially was Google Analytics for the real world, with connected to CD stores, or I should say record stores, where they would, scan it. And so this week you sold, 1,000 discs. This
Right.
week you sold 2,500. So anyways, that's what SoundScan is. Continue.
So by Christmas of that year, we were selling 12,000 a week.
You were moving 12,000 units a week.
Or maybe more.
Wow.
The first week in January, I got a call from Tom Durr, who was head of artist development for Universal. And he said, well, we're taking over from Mojo now. He said, strap yourself into the rocket sled, Howard, because it's happening. And he just we're doing radio, we're doing the push. And then
Wow.
by March of that year, March or April, we had sold 500,000. And by August, we'd sold 1 million. And that's
Wow,
and
dude,
it was
that is so
Jay
cool.
Leno, Tonight
Yeah.
Show, David Letterman.
Oh my gosh.
It was crazy. It wasn't. I have to say, just that at that point, by the middle of that year, I hated the music business because you were dealing with people who were just not nice people. Let's put it that way.
It's a very politically correct way
and you're
to
dealing
say
with
it.
sharks. I don't know how much you remember that time coming into the office, but I was locked in my office, just stressed out all the time.
Oh no.
It was terrible. We had sold 1 million records. We ended up being 2 million records. And Steve's got a huge publishing deal through Famous Music. And he decided that he still didn't have enough. So he needed another manager. And that's kind of when and that was the most frustrating. I just lost it at that point.
So that was 99?
Yep.
Is that around
That
the
was
time?
98.
98, okay.
And that's when the swing thing was kind of dying at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And my whole thing and I had this tour set up in Europe for the Daddies. And Steve decided to cancel the Europe tour and to go into the studio and record the next album. It didn't sell that much, and then Mojo dropped them, and Zomba took over, and that was about it.
That was the crest. That was the S curve of the mortgage.
I think, and then they put out an album. Zomba put out a third album because I guess we had an option for a third album. And so they put out a third album that was kind of the greatest hits from those two albums or something like that.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I saw it once. I think I have a copy somewhere at home in a drawer somewhere. But anyway, so then I left the music business at that point, which was fine because I really wanted to. At that point, what ended up was I finally got a contract from Steve, and I did pretty well. Sadly, I did better than the band members because their contract with Steve wasn't as good.
Okay.
I don't think that's my opinion, and probably
Sure.
they would hold that opinion too. So then I moved to LA and I started writing because I had a friend who was working, my friend David Weddle, who was a writer who I worked with on the Sam Peckinpah book that I mentioned way earlier in this conversation.
Yeah.
He and I stayed in touch and we're still really good friends. He'd been writing for TV at that point, but he got a deal for a book to write about history of Beverly Hills because there had been a book about the Hamptons that was a big deal. I forgot the name of it at the time. And so Random House had this idea to do this book about Beverly Hills. And so I had moved to LA and I'm going to do I need to get out of Oregon. I need to get writing again. And I needed to get as far away from the music business as I could.
So you moved to LA?
Well, not to be involved in the music business, but to just be away from the music business in Eugene.
Sure.
And John had moved to New Mexico, so it was like, okay.
Oh, yeah, no, totally. By that time, that whole thing had kind of dissipated.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I wrote a book. I spent the first 2 or 3 months, I wrote a book about my experience with the music business, fictionalized what I had gone through. And I wrote 300 or 400 pages. And then David called me and said, hey, the Beverly Hills book? I just got this job on this TV show. I really want to write for TV. And so let's do this thing where you do the research and the interviews for the book and write the first draft, and then I'll come in and rewrite it, and we'll put the book out. And we made a contract between us so that the whole thing was so that it wouldn't cause any tension between us because we were such good friends. There's a chance that your name won't be on the cover of the book, but I'll make sure that you're prominently mentioned in the notes of the book. And so I learned how to write a nonfiction book. I was a fiction writer, but it was literary nonfiction. And it was great. It was the most awesome experience in my life.
So what was the book actually about then?
It was about the history of Beverly Hills.
Oh, the history of Beverly Hills. Okay.
Yeah, but it was the characters. So we did one, and so it's David I want to do this so writing about stuff that's fun for me. I don't want to write about. I did one chapter about the Iranian population that kind of lives. There's a big Iranian population and how they came in and created this dissident community in Beverly Hills, and now they're the richest people in Beverly Hills, and they run all the shops and they're realtors, and so I went to this huge, God, $1 million wedding in Beverly Hills, and these people had these huge diamond rings. That's the biggest. That guy over there, he's the biggest diamond dealer in Tel Aviv, and it was like all these people came and we did my favorite one was we did one. I'm really into David. When I was a kid growing up, you couldn't get these movies on VCRs at the time. You had to go to a library and watch them. But I was really into the Marx Brothers.
Oh yeah,
so I was really into vaudeville, and David was really into vaudeville, and he was into Buster Keaton. So we had this vaudeville thing between us that was our passion.
Yeah, that's what you connected on, huh?
And so we decided, let's do something about the Friars Club. You know the Friars Club?
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we went, but the thing was, the Friars Club was dying at that point. They probably still exist, but there'd been a bunch of articles that were kind of slamming how they were dying, and they were like, didn't want anybody coming into the Friars Club and writing about them anymore. Their PR person was like, no, we're not allowing any interviews at this point.
So you're like the secret, like you're kind of the secret
So
police.
So David lived in Malibu, where I lived, in Paradise Cove, and he lived next door to this guy, Joe, and this woman, I forgot her name, but she was the second Trixie in The Honeymooners. And Joe
really?
Joe was a nightclub owner in Miami in the 50s, so he knew like all those people because they did nightclubs.
That's their world. Yeah.
So he knew he was really good friends with Dick Van Patten.
Oh wow.
So he's like, Dick goes there every day and plays poker. You should I'll call Dick and tell him you're going to come in and have dinner with him there. And I'm like, okay. So I go there and I'm going to meet Dick Van Patten. I go upstairs. I hear this booming voice. It's like, that voice sounds really familiar. And I get into the dining room, and there's like Milton Berle sitting in the corner, like holding court with all these people telling stories. And he was pretty. He didn't look great. It was like he died like 6 to 8 months later. But Dick Van Patten was like, hey, Howard, how you doing? And he was super nice, like sweet, nice guy, and a great dinner. Like Milton Berle didn't want to. He tried to get Milton Berle to talk to me, but Milton Berle was like, no, I don't want to do that right now. And he was kind of like you could tell he wasn't doing well. Like his wife had to he tried to stand up. And he was
man, that's
rickety, and his
crazy.
wife kind of held, his wife was like younger, and she kind of like grabbed onto him and helped him. And he was like 89, he was like in his 80s, like mid 80s.
That dude lived a pretty good life, man.
Yeah, totally. That was a great experience for me.
Wow, so you went to go write, you went to LA, did some writing.
Then the book was published, and I didn't get my book name on the cover, whatever. And then David...
You don't seem to be like a very starstruck kind of dude. Like, you just want to be a writer, right? Yeah. Like,
So then David was like, well, what are you going to do next? At that point, every major newspaper had a magazine, and the magazines were the best paying. The newspapers paid $0.25 a word. The magazines paid $1 a word.
Oh,
so
yeah.
LA Times had a magazine. Well, New York Times still has their magazine. The Washington Post used to have a magazine. Portland, the Oregonian used to have a magazine. And it used to be a thing, but then, as newspapers, it became, as the internet started closing in on and taking over from the newspapers and taking their dollars away, because people would go to the internet instead of buying the newspapers, the magazines started folding. But the LA Times magazine still existed at that point. So David, being the friend that he was, he called the LA Times for me, the editor there who he knew, because before he was writing for TV, he was an investigative journalist, and he wrote for like major magazines. And so he knew the editor of LA Times, called her and said, I have this really good friend, and he's got this idea. And my idea was, when I toured with the Daddies in Europe with Van's Warped Tour, how that culture had taken over Europe, which was a seemingly American thing, skateboarding, starting in California, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, I had this idea about the movement of our culture into Europe. I pitched this idea to Alice Short. She was the editor at the time, and I pitched her the idea, and she was like, awesome, 2,000 words, this will be a feature, go ahead and write it. I'll send you a contract. And so that was when I wrote like 3 or 4 stories to the LA Times. One was about, so it was awesome. So then I wrote this article. I interviewed all the guys in Bad Religion. I interviewed all these old punk rock guys who were my heroes growing up.
Nice.
The guys who are and I knew Kevin Lyman from the Warped Tour because the Daddies did in the Warped Tour. Kevin's an awesome individual. last year of the Warped Tour this year.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yeah. And then I did one where I interviewed Mike Watt because he was putting out a new album.
Oh, cool.
Sat on a cliff in frickin' San Pedro for 2.5 hours with Mike Watt. The interview ended like at an hour, 45 minutes in. But Mike, if you've ever met Mike, is a great person. And we just talked about life and growing up in that era. And I have all that stuff transcribed. One of these days, one of my things I really want to do is take the transcription and put it online of those interviews.
Oh, heck yeah, man.
So I interviewed him, and I interviewed Sonic Youth, Thurston Moore. So it's the same thing. I interviewed Ricky Lee Jones. It was freaking awesome.
Wow.
And then I did an article about skateboard, about Stacy Peralta was putting out the Dogtown documentary.
Oh yeah.
So I found out about
Powell Peralta. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I found out about that. Was coming out, so I pitched the idea to write an article about that, and interviewed Stacy Peralta, interviewed like all these skateboarders. It was.
And what'd you say this was for? The New York Times or the
LA
Times?
LA
Times.
Yep.
LA Times.
Yep. And then I would, I'd pitch them, I'd sell them out. I'd piece the articles down, and I'd sell them out to other magazines. But living in LA was, I don't know. Living in Malibu was great. I had the money at the time to do that, but it was like the problem was. I just felt like the community in Oregon was so much better. I had so many really good friends here, and I was like, I'd come back to Oregon to visit, and I'd be like, what am I doing in LA? Oh, yeah, it's like a professional thing. But after a while, I realized that I really wanted to be back here, and I was like, I'm a freelancer. I don't need to be in.
Yeah, you can live wherever you want, man.
And then like 2000, so getting into the question you asked me like way back, in 2005, I moved back here in 2003. 2005, 2004, The Invisible Men was a record label in Eugene called Leisure King. Remember The Invisible Men? I don't remember that band. It was Dan Schmid, Dustin Lanker.
Okay, I know those guys, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm really good friends with, I've known Dan since like when I first moved to Eugene. And Dustin, obviously. He was in the Daddies, and we're on the road a lot together. Yeah. And so Dustin was like, hey, you ever think about getting back in the business? And I was like, no, I will not do that again. Because the last year dealing with the major label people was just hell. Then Dustin was like, but it won't be that way because it's us. And you don't have to do everything for us, which of course I ended up doing anyway. But I wasn't a road manager, but I helped with the merch and I didn't have to put the record out because I had a record label. And so I started working with them and then I started working with I Can Look Any Son of a Bitch in the House. And then I started working with Hill Stomp. Then I started with the Quick and Easy Boys. And so this is time moving forward now. But the thing was, the business is a completely different place with the internet, with the digitalization of music.
Right. And so, yeah, that was going to be, I have a few questions about that for sure.
I mean, it was like back in the day, you could make a CD for $1 and sell it for 10. It's a 900% markup.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now you make a CD, you spend all this money. You know how much it costs to make a CD. Back in the day, it cost like $10,000 or whatever to make a good one at Bill Barnett's, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, now you can obviously do it at home for cheaper, right?
Yeah, totally.
But you spend all this time making an album, you spend money putting it out, and because of the technology, there's a ton more bands than there was back when Henry Childs or the Daddies existed. Yeah. And then you've got these services like the iTunes and you can go through CD Baby or whatever, but the thing is, one song, you think about this, like one song, you're selling one song for 99 cents or whatever, right? Well, you probably know the story, but I'll say it anyway. You're selling one song for 99 cents or an album for $10. Is it $10? I think, no, I don't know how much it is.
Let's round it up to 10.
Yeah, let's round it to 10.
Sure.
For $9.99. But the thing is, what is it? I might be misquoting this. You can correct me if I'm wrong, if I don't remember this correctly. But it's like, okay, iTunes, you buy a 99-cent song on iTunes. iTunes takes like 40%, and then CD Baby takes 15%. You're making 45 cents for one song. So say someone buys Hall, you're making $4.50 for an album, maybe, because now people don't buy albums, they buy songs, even though record labels still want albums.
I mean, even now, we're even past that. Where like there's like it goes beyond that, where they go, I'm just going to listen to it on Spotify,
Right.
and I'm never even going to buy your album. So I was going to go back to that. I mean, like I'd be stoked if somebody was
Right,
buying
exactly.
our album off of
And then at
iTunes.
Spotify, it's 0.0021 cents per song.
Carrie Rich and I were doing that, and he called me up. We had just done the math on what it would take to get like, I think it was a $6 of a royalty fee. It was like 2.3 million, plays or something like that.
So there's that part of it.
So when you were managing bands the second time, was kind of right as that stuff was kind of just getting
it was
into,
taking, it was like,
it was becoming a thing.
It was going more and more and more. Like by 2010, when I was doing Quick and Easy Boys, it was like, what are you going to make? And for a band like Hill Stomp, Hill Stomp was did their stuff through InGrooves, which is a digital distribution and system, and they're out of San Francisco. We'd get the statements, and you could see exactly who was downloading and where it was from, like Europe. They did some stuff in Europe, so you could see Europe. The amount per song, it was just like, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah.
People are not downloading the albums; they're downloading the songs, and so this is the thing. Not to put it back on me, but it's like, okay, if someone's making 45 cents per song, what's 15% of 45 cents after expenses?
Like
for a manager,
9 cents for
nothing, because they didn't make their money back yet, because I don't make any money.
You haven't recouped yet. Yeah. Sure.
So I was not one of those guys who would, not tooting my own horn, and maybe I am, but I thought I was very nice about my contracts.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, bands would still complain sometimes because they didn't understand the business end of it. The people who did understand the business never really complained much about it. Then there was the touring aspect of it. Well, that changed because people don't want to go to bars and pay covers anymore, and venues don't want to pay guarantees.
There's also a lot more entertainment you can get at home.
Exactly, and that too. But the thing is like going way back to the beginning of our conversation, like the Daddy's playing 3 45-minute sets at Phoenix Underground for $3,000. That is not going to happen in 2018. And if you don't want to get paid $600 to do that, some other band's going to do it for $600, so you can go take a hike.
Sure.
That kind of guarantee, those guarantees don't exist anymore. The other thing that's happening with the business is you've got gas being more expensive. So,
oh yeah, totally.
Like with the Daddies, we had 2 vans. Well, we had 2 vans at one point when gas was like under $2 a gallon. Now how can you do 2 vans at $3 a gallon? With 2 vans making how much of the vans? What's the gas mileage on a van? Like 12 maybe.
Yeah, 12 miles a gallon. Sure, of course.
If you're lucky.
Yeah.
It's just more and more expensive. Oh, the other thing is you've got, I don't know what the word would be economically, but you've got the thing where, okay, the disparity between the rich and the poor.
Oh yeah, big time.
Right? Mm-hmm. So you've got like major people making tons of money, but what happened is around, I don't know when it was around 2008, I think. I saw it started happening, where all the major, not the record labels, but the booking agencies started buying up the smaller booking agencies. So in order to find a booking agent was like impossible. And even then, the smaller booking agents wouldn't pick you up unless you gave them a retainer because they didn't want to not make money. So
they took on the lawyer model where they're like, look, I got to get guaranteed that I'm going to get paid, and then I'll produce something for you in the future.
Right. And it wasn't like with the Daddies, we would go, I mean, I'm sure Tahoe agents picked this up because they knew they'd make like, if we stayed in the Northwest, we'd play Phoenix Underground for $3,000. We'd play La Luna, 2,500, $3,000. We'd make $2,000 for them in 1 month, just touring around, right? So we knew the Daddies made money at that point. But if you're a band and that kind of money doesn't exist and you're at a level where you're not even a mid-level band, like I always think about things in vaudeville. You got small time, medium time, and big time, right?
Right.
And so there's no the medium time is like from like small to big. There's no, in order to make that it's really difficult.
So one thing that has been a recent conversation that apparently has been going on for like 8 or 9 years, and I just wasn't aware of it until we started getting records out and starting to play shows, was that you can now buy onto bigger acts like 3 or 4 nights in a row.
Oh yeah.
So if there's a big act coming through that's going to play, like have a really good show.
That's been going on for a while. And the thing about that is, like a lot of venues will be like, well, you can open for them, but you have to sell this many tickets on your own before you can be the opening band, right?
Right, okay.
And, or give us, buy on and you can be the opening band, but, we want to see your numbers so we know you can draw X amount of people, right?
So, Howard, what's a band to do then?
Play music because you love it.
There you go. Beautiful.
I mean, same thing with writing. I mean, I put out this book because I didn't expect to make $1 million. I did it because I loved it, right?
Yeah, it's a good book too.
Yeah, just do it because you love it. Play gigs out. Like I have friends going to a show tonight. They in town, they play, and they're older guys, and they just want to play music. They just put out an album. They just want to do it. I mean, we all want to make a ton of money, but it's pretty much come down to art for art's sake, right?
Yeah.
Music and writing. If you were all putting it out ourselves, I think that's the reason to do it. If you're doing it because you want to make $1 million, then go to LA and just do whatever they tell you to do and see if it works, and be happy doing that.
Be happy doing what they tell you.
Exactly. And there are people like that. I mean, you and I go like, what? Yeah, forget it.
Yeah, exactly.
But there are people like, well, if they want me to sing this song that some idiot recorded and I hate it, but they're guaranteeing it's going to be a hit, then I'll do it. And and if you can guarantee something's going to be a hit, I got some land in some swamp land for you.
Exactly. I got a good deal for you.
I got a good deal for you. You know how that sounds.
So tell me so let's talk about the book real quick.
Okay.
Let's talk about the book. Where can people get it? What is it about? It's a series, right?
Yep.
So I have to confess, what you're looking at right now is how far I've actually made it through. So I'm pretty
Let me see where you are. Yeah, you're in a good place. I don't want to give it away. I don't want to give anything away. Well, you can get it. You can go to your local independent bookstore, and if you want to patronize a local store and make sure they make some money off it, you can go to them and order it. That's one way. There's always Amazon if you want to do that. In Portland, Powell's has it in their warehouse.
Oh,
and
great.
If you go there and say you want it, they may have a copy in the store, but they can get it. If it's in their warehouse, they probably can get it pretty quick. In Eugene at the U of O Duck store, at Smith Family Bookstore.
Does distribution for a book work the same way that distribution for like old record?
The way
CDs?
it is, I'm not, okay, going way back to the start of our conversation, I used to know about publishing back in the day, but it's a completely different animal now, obviously, because this is print on demand, right? So when you ordered that, did you order that on Amazon? Where'd you get that book?
I ordered this on Amazon.
Okay, so what happens is, you order it on Amazon, and they own a company called CreateSpace. And so what I did is with the help of a company in Eugene who does stuff like this, I uploaded the thing. They designed the book, designed the inside of the book and the cover. We uploaded it onto CreateSpace. And then CreateSpace sends me a proof. Then you go to the distribution thing, and you can say, okay, let's put it on Amazon. And then so it goes out on Amazon and Kindle. And Barnes & Noble's is the same way. Well, basically, that's how it works. And so as far as just physical, like if you go to an independent bookstore and you say, I want to order it, there's a company called Ingram. And it's basically POD for them, too.
It is just a trip to think that we live in the future. So I'm holding this physical book in my hand. It's about, let's say, probably 2 inches thick.
464 pages.
464 pages.
Right.
Even got a picture of this dude in the back here. It's got this wonderful, awesome cover, on it. And this was print on demand. I think I ordered this on a Monday, and it showed up on a Wednesday.
Yep.
And I was one of those people. And I will admit, when I fall into the traps that I tell everybody else about, I went and I looked it all up, Howard Libes, and typing it in, and it came up with Amazon Prime, and it was like $1 more than the other print on demand, which I was like, oh, that's
really?
I'm like, you know what? I just want it in a couple days, kind of a thing. So I sort of clicked on Amazon. I paid the extra $1 with Amazon Prime for free shipping. So it's like you get the free shipping, but then the thing actually costs more.
Yeah.
So it's a great book. I gotta say, I don't read much science fiction. And I think that the reason that it's taking me so long to do it is because I'm so captivated by the story. It's all about the characters and, Yor and his whole thing. And I don't want to get too much into it, but it really follows what's happening today.
Right.
It's a commentary on what's occurring.
Well, basically, we might as well tell them what the book is about. So it's basically it's set on a planet called Coda, which is not Earth, but it could be Earth. It's a story of a young man who is trying to find out about his great-grandfather, who was the most famous explorer of his time. Because the planet, this will really not ring a bell with anybody, but the planet is going through a climate change crisis, an environmental crisis. Drastic one, like very quick, accelerated crisis. And so what they decide to do at one point, they're a little more advanced than we are, and they send out spaceships to find another planet for the people on Coda. And his great-grandfather was one of the most famous of those people, and he helped the program grow and change and become as big as it was. And they never found a planet, but the last ship to go out was his great-grandfather saying, I'm going to find something. So he was like, the hope of the planet was on his great-grandfather, and he went out and he never came back. And 122 years later, he comes back, and he is not much older than he was for reasons that you'll read in the book. And he basically, there's a he comes back, but no one ever talks about whether he found a planet or he says he hadn't found a planet, but there's a whole mystery around what happened. There's people on the planet who believe that on Coda, who believe he did find a planet for them to live on. There are people, but there's all this other mystery going on about his great-grandfather. And so that's basically it. So it's kind of a mystery.
Yeah.
A science fiction mystery.
Sci-fi mystery.
So yeah, and it's an idea I had, funny. So when I stopped working in the music business, my last client was the Mad Caddies. A ska band. Great guys, but I just didn't want to do it anymore. For existential reasons, I had a death in my family. My sister died, and I was aggravated over the music business, and for the last 6 months of her life, she kept saying to me, life's too short, Howard. Do what makes you happy. And I was like, you know what? Coming from someone who's like looking at the end of their life, and she said it a lot to me.
Yeah.
And I was just like, and so I decided, I gave it one more year after she died, and then I just thought, I'm done with the music business. I'm just going to write now. I had invested my money well from the daddies, bought a house in Eugene, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this until I need to maybe find some more work, which is kind of getting to that point. But that's another story. I had my novel that I wrote back out of graduate school, which I never got published, was about my family's immigration to the United States and their experience in that, because I was a first-generation American, and my dad came here in 1920, and I was born when he was 54, so I had this whole weird, I knew all about.
Wow.
I had this expansive history to write about. And
were you the youngest of your?
Well, they had their first kid when my dad was 49. So my mother and father had kids late in life.
Yeah.
But which in that time was kind of weird, like in the 60s and late 50s for, everyone always thought my parents were my grandparents.
I'll tell you what, though, I bet they were really present to you guys growing up.
Oh, my God.
I bet they were they
were there.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
So my father was a family of 10 kids, so my cousins were literally, I have a cousin who's one of my first cousins, 90s, they're in their 90s,
Whoa. Okay.
Because there was 10 kids, and my dad was the youngest of 10 kids, and his brothers were 20 years older than him. Because back in those days, you had huge families, right?
Yeah. Well, you needed it to work the land and
exactly.
stuff, right?
And then I had the stuff I wrote about the music business, which actually ended up being a book about vaudeville. But then I stopped writing it and got involved in the music business, and I stopped writing once I got involved in the music business again, because it kind of like overwhelmed me. And at the end of the day, I was just not feeling like writing. So I was like, what am I going to write? And I had this idea when I was 12, 13 years old that was loosely the basis for this book. Because at the time, the ozone layer thing was happening, the chlorophar and the
with aerosol cans.
Fluorocarbons, you remember?
Yeah, with aerosol cans.
And then we had a hole in the ozone, and there was a big environmental crisis. And I had the idea for this book, and I had written, and so in the 40 years since then, I had like different drafts of the book. Like I'd come back to this idea. And so
that's awesome.
And so I was like, what do I want to do? What would be the most fun thing to do to write? And I love science. I grew up, when I was a kid, I didn't like to read. And my parents were always worried about me. And my friend of mine said, you like Star Trek? We were all into monster movies, into science fiction. He's like, why don't you read Asimov and Bradbury? And he was a big comic book nerd. He had like 600 comic books in his closet. And he was like, why don't you read science fiction? So I went to the library and just like read Asimov and Bradbury and Arthur C. Clarke and just read some fantasy and Tolkien, of course, and just devoured those books.
Wow, yeah.
So then I was like really into science fiction. So I was like, I'll get back to my roots and write science fiction. And a lot of people who have read this book, like John, like a lot of people who read this book were like, reminds me of Bradbury and Asimov. And I'm like, yeah, it's because that's my...
A little bit of influence. Yeah. So what is next?
Heinlein, yeah.
Yeah. So what is next on the horizon? You going to do another book?
I'm working on the second book in the series. It's a series. This is the first book in the series called When All Else Fails.
How many books are going to be in the series?
I'm shooting for a trilogy.
Okay. Cool.
It might be 4 books, but I think it's going to be 3. And then the second book, I just finished the first draft of the second book. It's called Foreseeable Future.
Yeah. I saw the cover.
Yeah, I'm really happy with the cover.
Yeah, it's pretty dope.
Yeah,
I like it.
Dave Snyder did this cover. There's a lot of talented people, and that's the whole thing. Having those friends in Eugene, it's like it's a lot of talented people there.
Yeah, there really is.
It's funny because like I was talking about the friends in the music business. So when I was in graduate school, one of the things that happened was like David and I became friends because David was covering at the time. Ken Kesey was doing a novel writing class.
Oh, at the U of O?
In 88, 89, and Kesey he was a big Kesey. He was a friend of Kesey. He had become befriended Kesey, he was writing an article for Rolling Stone about the class. He came up to Eugene to write the article and became friends with a couple of people in the class who were my friends. And then when he was working on the Peckinpah book, a couple of Peckinpah's family live in Portland now.
Oh, interesting.
So
okay.
he would and he didn't have a lot of money. So he would drive back after interviewing and stay at our house in Eugene. And that's how David and I became friends.
Oh, cool.
And so I was in Minnesota doing a reading. Jeff Forrester, who's mentioned, is an environmentalist. He says something on the back of the book too. I was staying with his family, and I read the book. I did a reading there, and a friend of his who I had never met before, after the reading, said to Jeff, this is kind of like topical. And I said, and Jeff turned to him and said, yeah. And he started writing this before things that are going on politically are going on.
Yeah, totally.
And I was like, so I feel like I've sort of hit a vein. And, the same thing with the thing with the daddies was, when people ask me wow, that doesn't usually happen. I said, we kind of it's like a wave. We kind of hit the wave at the right time. So you hit the sweet spot in the wave, you get a really good ride.
Yeah, totally.
And a lot of that, why did that happen? I said, well, a lot of life and a lot of success in life has to do with luck and timing.
Right. Right.
So who knows? We'll see what happens with the next book.
yeah, luck and timing. Well, a lot of it is, I don't want to say it's on the nose, but it's close because there's a lot of world control in there, and there's a lot of, I'm not saying it right, I don't remember what it is, but I'm horrible about those characters. But they're very lovable. They're very, very, very relatable.
There are some people who are not nice in the book too.
Yeah, scars on their hands. Yeah, exactly.
And the leader is kind of reminiscent of people we know
Yep.
are
Yep.
aware of in the news every day. And it was funny because, after the last election, like 1984 became one of the most popular books. It was like selling. Do you know about this? It was selling
No.
it was selling really well on Amazon, like all of a sudden. And people were like, oh my God, this is going to come. I mean, have you read 1984?
Oh, yeah. No,
Okay.
I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
So, but the whole dystopian society where fake news exists and, it's like, okay, well, when did he write that book? He wrote that book like in 48. He just flipped the numbers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So here we are 70 years later, and Orwell was kind of,
It's kind of a trip. It's kind of a trip. Thanks for coming in, Howard. I
man.
appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been really enjoyable.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
It's
Thanks,
good seeing
man.
you.
Good to see you too. Hey guys, Tom here. Thanks for tuning in to my conversation with Howard. And as you can tell, we had a lot of fun talking about the past and what we've been up to in the present. Like we mentioned in the podcast, you can get his book When All Else Fails through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or the University of Oregon bookstore if you happen to be in Eugene. You should also check out Howard's website. It's got a plethora of information on it, and it talks about the book and the second book that he's going to be writing in the Cedar series as well. And you can check that out at howardlibes.com. That's HOWARDLIBES.com. As always, if you liked what you heard, please go to your respective podcast stores, wherever you get your podcasts, and leave us a 5-star rating. That way I can continue to bring you the Am I Crazy or Am I Just Raving podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you soon.